Hi everyone. I am actually going to talk about the therapy technique called the empty chair technique. It is a Gestalt type therapy technique that was used, and what's nice about it is it can be used in any type of situation, whether it's in grief therapy, abuse therapy, things of that nature. Um, it can also be used in both a group or as an individual therapeutic modality. So the whole premise of the technique is you have two chairs and the client sits in the one chair and the second chair is obviously empty. And the client is then going to put either a behavior that they dislike, about themselves, whether it's the drug abuse or a drug of choice or something like that, or a person that they have either lost or have been abused from or something of that nature, into that chair, theoretically. So from that, they they sit there. The therapist moves kind of to the back, and the therapist asks them to move the chairs in a position that they feel comfortable in, and they ask them to just begin and to start a dialogue between the hypothetical person or situation or thing in the other chair and themselves and what they would actually say. It can be, as I said, it can be used as loss of a loved one, abuse, neglect, and also some, mental health issues or behaviors. So if someone has bipolar, and when they get to a point where they're extremely manic and that behavior really frustrates them, they can talk to that facet of the behavior and really verbalize exactly what is so frustrating for them and so concerning and hard, and why that behavior is so painful to them, and it gains an insight for them as well. What's nice is in this type of intervention, it not only gives information to the therapist, but it also gives information to the patient. So for the therapist is sitting back, so they're watching, which is great because they're able to see body positioning, the inflection of the voice of the client, and they're also able to hear the true feelings of what the patient really feels and the emotions that are sometimes really lying underneath, because when you just ask a question to someone, the whole story doesn't come out. But when you're watching someone have a dialogue, the therapist is really able to see like what the whole situation is. And for the patient, it's really good insight into how they're feeling, because sometimes maybe at the beginning they might feel that they're angry, or they verbalize to the patient or to the therapist, I'm sorry, that they're just angry with the person, or they're mad or upset or sad, but in reality they might be scared or concerned about someone or relieved. I mean, there's any type of emotion that could come out of this. There are also, especially in this situation, if there's grief or there's an abusive situation, the person is able to kind of get their last word in and really gain closure of the entire situation, with whether trauma or grief related. So what I'll do is I will begin this. I will start. So I have two chairs set here together. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use it for like loss of a spouse. So I would sit down here and I would set my two chairs. I'm sitting in one. Sorry, I don't have much space in my new little apartment. So this would be my empty chair, and I am sitting in my chair and I'm looking at it. And as a therapist, the therapist would be sitting over here, kind of out to the side, and they'd be able to take notes and really just kind of watch what the client would be doing. So the scenario that I have is that my spouse has died in an unexpected car accident. And the first thing that the therapist would do would say, okay, set your two chairs up, and this is how I would set the two chairs up. being close to my spouse and it being a freak accident, I would want to be close. But there might be someone who had, sexual abuse happen, and they might be able to put the chairs much farther apart, which kind of allows the therapist to see how they're feeling towards the person and the emotion in the situation, and be able to visualize that as well, which is nice. So allowing the client to position the two chairs is very important as well. The therapist would then say, okay, you can begin. You can talk to your husband, Kyle. Hi, Kyle. I just wanted, to let you know that I miss you and that I'm really angry with you. I miss you. I miss you so much, and the kids miss you, and I just wish you were back. And there might be a situation where the person gets, upset or, starts crying, and that's fine. You can give them as much time as they need. And then the therapist is able to talk to them and say, okay, well, I understand you miss them. Is there anything else you would like to say to them? Yes. Yes, Kyle, I'm just really upset that this happened. I'm mad. I'm actually really mad, and I feel guilty that I'm very angry with you because I feel like you've left me. And I feel that as a mother of your children, that I feel like you've abandoned me. And I know that that is not a normal feeling, and I know that I shouldn't feel that way, and I feel guilty about it, but unfortunately that's how my feelings are, and I feel guilty about feeling mad at you. So then in that point, the therapist, as a therapist, I would be able to redirect, myself to actually, I would say, let's do a role reversal. So say, Ashley, please move over to the other chair and pretend you're the husband. So I would come over here and I would physically ask the client to move so that they can kind of see exactly, have the visualization of that. And if I was Kyle, I would say, sweetheart, she would say, what would your husband say back to you? And he would say, sweetheart, I absolutely understand where you're coming from. It's okay to be mad at me. It's also okay to be frustrated. It's okay to be scared, but that you can always lean on your family because you have a good, strong family, and that you can, move on with your life. It's okay to grieve for me, but know that I love you and I love the boys, and I really, want you to live a happy life. And then as the therapist, I would say, okay, move back to your original position, from the role reversal, and sit there. And from a therapist perspective, that's kind of when you start asking questions. Say, now what would you say next to your husband? Or how do you feel that he said that? So speak to Kyle. And as the client, I would say that makes me feel better because I know that that's what he would say to me, and that he would want me, to continue, and that he wouldn't be mad at me if it was, role reversal in this situation. And then as the client, I would probably, continue and say, I miss you, and I wish you were here, and I'm not sure how I'm going to do this by myself, but that, knowing that I've always had your support and you care about me and you always did, and you able to reassure me that I'm able to, go on with my life and go on with the boys. And then as the therapist, the next thing you would do would be like, okay, are you finished? And then obviously if I was the client again, this makes it a bit different because there's 3 people instead of 2. You would say, okay, yes, I am finished. And as the therapist would then say, okay, what's the last thing you would like to say to the empty chair, or to the person, to your husband? And as the client, I would say, I love you and I miss you, and I hope that you're in a better place, and I will tell the boys how much I love you. So, and then at that point, the next portion of this, depending on how long this takes, it might take 10 minutes, it might take an hour. It really kind of depends. So in the role of the therapist, the important point of this is to let the client kind of sit back and reflect and see how they feel. And then it would be really important to then process the feelings, the emotions, the behaviors that occurred during this type of therapy. So as a therapist, one of the questions that you should ask them is, how did you feel, initially at the beginning of this? And they might say they were uncomfortable. They might say that it started out as being really difficult because they felt uncomfortable because there is no one in the chair. And then you can say something along the lines of, what physically, what were you feeling in your hands? I noticed, that your hands clenched up when you started talking about how you were angry at him because you felt that he had left you. So what was the physical sensation that you had during this whole situation, when you had started to explain you were angry? And the client would then be able to express and really process what they were feeling during this situation, and would also be able to kind of give them closure as to, obviously, if this is my husband who has died and I was not able to say goodbye to them, I would be able to finally get that last I love you, I care about you, I've always cared about you, things of that nature. And if you were in a group setting, you would also be able to get information from the rest of the group that was sitting out watching this type of therapeutic technique go on, and see any comments that they saw, if they saw any body positioning that was different than normal, if they heard any inflections in the client's voice, and also just to kind of see if there's any insight into either the type of closure, or if there's anything else that could have been said that really wasn't said. So that's, my type of therapy. That would be the empty chair technique. And I know it was a bit confusing because I was playing 3 separate people, all of which who weren't there at the same time. But I can tell you it does work. I've used it before, and it's actually done some wonders. So that's my technique. Thank you.